Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Miguel.
And I'm Michelle.
And today we're going to look at the time lapse of my version of King Solomon, and we're going to talk about the great, mighty Jedediah. By the way, is another alternative name for King Solomon. Solomon Jedediah. So we're just going to get right into it and talk about what inspired me and why I chose King Solomon. So basically, he's a very iconic legend in the world, in world history, in religious history. He's pretty much like the King Arthur of the Middle East. So King Solomon was mentioned in both like the Bible, obviously, and the Talmud or the Torah, as it is known for the Jews. What I love about King Solomon to begin with is how people often talk about King Arthur as the one great mighty king, but King Solomon has much more like mystical flair. People don't actually realize how his legend and his legacy is pretty widespread these days. In sort of non-canonical mythology, aside from Judaism and Christianity, legend has it that King Solomon was given the gift to summon and control 72 different demons. Because little do people know that not only is he a great wise king, he's also known to be a magician, a philosopher, an alchemist, a poet. He's pretty much a Renaissance man of his time. For me personally, I'm really big into the occult and dark magic and stuff, and pretty, edgy, teenager, edgy goth face kind of deal. So with me, it was like hands down one of the best choices I ever liked to draw, the best legends I wanted to draw. So in my version of King Solomon, this was, by the way, one of my earlier works. I'm not too proud of it, but what inspired me was to give it, again, a very like mystical, made-up sort of design. I didn't really do that much work into the historical or cultural research. So I just added a bit of like my own flair, what I think King Solomon would look like in my world, at least. But I did bring up some like iconic symbolism in my piece that at least King Solomon fans would look at it like, oh, okay, I get why you put that. So I gave him a little goetia that he's holding. A goetia is a term used as referring to a spell book. So like the Ars Goetia is one of the 3 books in the occult world which King Solomon had. And that one book, the first book, the Ars Goetia, is the book that he uses to summon demons. And that's why I have that book, just some ordinary book, I don't know. And then on his left hand, he has what it seems to be like he's casting spells. And so that's why I had him do that, kind of, emitting energy and just kind of playing around. Again, doesn't look too clean, but I just wanted to see what I could do and try to boost my creativity as much as I can. So that's my King Solomon.
Are the color choices have any significance or any relation to King Solomon's aesthetic or anything like that?
Actually, I'm glad you asked. So the purple I use is one of the red and the purple are prominent colors in which King Solomon is often represented, at least in ancient times. And of course, as you know, purple is often the symbol of royalty, since he's king. Red, of course, sometimes also symbolizes passion, his passion for knowledge. And all the other colors are just kind of thrown in there to create contrast, such as the bright yellow. Oh yeah, black, because my favorite color is black, and that is like an obvious symbol of like dark, edgy, mysterious.
Very young looking King Solomon.
Yeah, I don't even pay attention to the age either. It's just like, it's my first time on the tablet. And
usually there's always depictions of King Solomon, but always like an old guy. Is there
Precisely.
Is there a significance why for that kind of depiction?
Oh, definitely. Unlike me, people back then, when they depict things, they're very thoughtful, very, very symbolic. So a person that's old age is a very sort of universal symbol for wisdom. So when you see a lot of depictions of King Solomon, with the exception of the Bible and the Talmud, talking about his life, growing up, being a young king, and then growing old, but visually speaking, King Solomon is often depicted as old, just like the other prophets, like Jesus, Enoch, Methuselah.
Nice. So what I really like about your design is that he is all about his own fashion statement. Is there an alternate word for skirt? It's not a skirt. It's like a wraparound waist.
So I believe our current lingo is we just simply call it a dress, and it's also a point of contention amongst like gender studies where men back then actually wore dresses, but it's more of a unisex thing, like both men and women. And then today, for some reason, it's just become assumed that the dress is just only for women. But back then, it was actually a manly thing to have a dress because the dress was by gender. It's for both genders.
I like how it's a very animated character to have a book like ready to go in casting his spell, and I just assume for someone so powerful, would he need a book to like cast a proper spell?
Well, see, technically,
is the book have to be part of the spell?
As a magician, you don't have like innate powers. You evoke powers from the great beyond. Or if you're a wizard, you kind of learn. It's also innate, but you still have to like practice it. And then if you're a warlock, then you have to rely on like a genie or an entity or a god or a demigod to be permitted to use spells. So for him as a magician, it's like completely a lack of knowledge unless you're granted a gift. It's like, oh, okay, you know, and then you have to like practice it, because he's also known to be an alchemist, so it is according to legend that he also was well endowed with knowledge of the material world, because, you know, back then science and magic were like one and the same.
I kind of have not much knowledge of King Solomon, but based on what you've briefly explained, he seems like an OP character in some anime fantasy world.
Oh yeah, one last thing in pop culture, as I probably mentioned earlier, he's becoming a popular thing in the mainstream world, where a lot of fantasy games, anime even mentions King Solomon or references King Solomon and his demons. So
nice. Well, overall, I actually like your depiction of King Solomon. I would have assumed he is some kind of legendary character, even if I wasn't told it was King Solomon first. So I think you nailed it in terms of him being magical and fantastical. Thank you. So which is always your aesthetic. You go for a fantasy look. So let us know what you think. If you think Miguel's character can summon those demons in your home.
I hope any of that made sense. You know, King Solomon is quite a huge icon. So for those of you nerds out there, let us know in the comments what else I may have missed, or, you know, anything about King Solomon that I should have mentioned that you think is important. And besides that, let us know what you think. Even though this is an old work of mine, is he too young? Is he too colorful?
I think he's just right.
You know, is the book too ordinary that he's holding? But anyway, see you on the next review.
Bye!